First inflation, now shrinkflation. That's right. First inflation, now shrinkflation. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer. Thank you for joining us today. This podcast is called First Inflation, Now Shrinkflation, as I'm almost losing my voice today and fighting it all the way, which I apologize for. So what is shrinkflation? Shrinkflation is the idea that you make products smaller while at the same time charging the same price or even more. And this actually reminds me of an old Seinfeld skit, which came out years ago about shrinkage. That's the name shrinkflation, because the idea is you're shrinking the size of the product and at the same time you are charging the same price. Whereas inflation, it's the idea that there's too much demand for a limited supply, so therefore the price increases as a result of the supply and demand curve. And now we're having both. We're having a combination of inflation and problems in the supply chain being able to keep up with the demand, not because necessarily the demand is so big for products and services, but because of the fact that people haven't been working in the factories and haven't been working in the food processing centers to make these things. And as a result, we have shrinkflation. So that reminds me, as I said, of the Seinfeld bit about shrinkage, where George Costanza and Jerry Seinfeld were at I guess it was a hotel. They were away with two girls. And the idea is that these two guys, as they're away with these two attractive women, might end up having some success with their girlfriends, or at least these significant others. And so they go swimming, they're out in the sun, and George Costanza comes inside after having just swam in the pool, and the pool was apparently very cold. And one of the girls who he was trying to woo, of course, she walks in on him as he is completely naked because he's taking off his swimsuit, his bathing suit, and getting dressed. And so she walks in and she sees him, and her first reaction is she laughs. Not a good reaction. And this, of course, reminds me of shrinkflation, but we have this clip just to make it a little funny, and here it is.
But
what?
Well, I just got back from swimming in the pool, and the water was cold.
You mean shrinkage?
Yes!
Yes, you mean shrinkage, yes. And it's the same concept, of course, except that with consumer prices and consumer products, this is happening in large part because of COVID. And as I said, I apologize for my voice. Anyway, here's WXYZ Detroit Channel 7 talking about inflation and talking about the overall issue of prices going up on everyday products that you buy in the grocery store. We're going to hit the inflation thing first. Here it is.
The Bureau of Labor Statistics says year to year, gas prices are up 52%, airline tickets up 24%, home prices up 15%, hotel rooms up 7%, clothing up 3%, and used cars up a whopping 29%. So what are some of these companies doing? Shrinking new versions of their products to keep costs down, something known as shrinkflation.
Yeah, so something known as shrinkflation. It's happening all over the country. And of course, many of these products are ubiquitous. You can find Cheerios in most grocery stores anywhere in the country. And of course, what are they doing? Well, they're taking out a full cup of the product, sometimes 2 cups, out of the box, and they're making the box a little bit smaller, or thinner. So the box looks as tall as it used to, but it's thinner. It's very deceptive, by the way. I'm not sure if this is a deceptive consumer practice. Obviously it's legal, but do you even know that it's happening? Have you even noticed it? Well, here's CBS San Diego reporting, and they're interviewing this gentleman by the name of Edgar Dorsky, who's an expert on shrinkflation. He represents consumerworld.org. We have that clip, and here it is.
Edgar Dworsky is founder of consumerworld.org. He's been studying shrinkflation, or as he likes to call it, downsizing, for years.
Ice cream is kind of the classic case of downsizing. We started when ice cream was half a gallon, back around 2000. Then in 2003, they took out a full cup and they made it 56 ounces. And then in 2008, they took out another cup.
More recently, he says companies have ramped up this method, in part because, like shoppers, they too are dealing with inflation and need to cut costs without losing customers.
So you bought the ice cream. He was showing actually Breyer's ice cream. And initially, you had a full gallon of ice cream. Then Breyer's decided a number of years ago to take out a full cup of ice cream. So that's less packaging and less ice cream. But the price remained the same, which is, of course, shrinkflation. Then, recently, Breyer's decided to take out another cup, and they shrunk the packaging even more. It's really not that noticeable when you do it gradually like that. But then Breyer's also increased the price. So that's a combination of inflation and shrinkflation. And so in NPR, there's a great article. It's called Beware of Shrinkflation, Inflation's Devious Cousin. A couple of weeks ago, Edgar Dworsky called and walked into Stop and Shop grocery store in Somerville, Massachusetts, like a detective entering a murder scene. He stepped into the cereal aisle where he hoped to find the smoking gun. He scanned the shelves. Oh no, he thought. He was too late. The store had already replaced old General Mills cereal boxes, such as Cheerios and Cocoa Puffs, with newer ones. It was as though the suspect's fingerprints had been wiped clean. Then Dworsky headed toward the back of the store, and sure enough, the old boxes of Cocoa Puffs and Apple Cinnamon Cheerios were stacked at the end of one of the aisles. He grabbed an old box of Cocoa Puffs and put it side by side by the new one. Aha! The tip he had received was right on the money. General Mills, the manufacturer of the cereal, had downsized the contents of its family-size boxes from 19.3 ounces to 18.1 ounces. Imagine how much money they're saving. Dworsky went to the checkout aisle, and both boxes, gasp, were the same price. It was an open and shut case. General Mills is yet another perpetrator of shrinkflation. And that is happening all across the country. And it's happening, some say because of COVID. But it's really happening because so many people aren't working for whatever reason. And when you don't have people in the processing centers, the centers that process food, when you don't have people in the factories making cars and making other products, when you don't have people working in the service industry, they have to find ways of cutting costs. And that's what they're doing. So they're giving you this artificial indication that there is plenty of product out there when in fact there isn't. My wife, podcast listeners are going to love this. Again, I'm sorry for my voice. My wife showed me the bundle of toilet paper she just purchased. And a roll of toilet paper now looks to me like it's about half of the size of the toilet paper that you just purchased. And the frustrating thing with this is when you're on the toilet, you're like, wait a minute, I know it's not me that has a toilet paper problem. It must be my significant other or my spouse. And then I realized, because I thought it was just, something wrong, like somebody was stealing toilet paper. And in our closet, we had the old toilet paper that she had purchased from somewhere. I'm not sure. Maybe it was Sam's Club. And then the new product, which was actually bought at the local grocery store. And it was half the size. So I'm just wondering, how does that help you by cutting the quantity of toilet paper? I mean, are you going to naturally try to use less of it because the rolls are smaller? I'm looking at Chris, but this is what they're doing. And as you remember, during peak COVID in 2020, what did we run out of? Toilet paper, paper towels, simple paper products, right? It took many months before there seemed to be a shortage of food. Now we have a shortage of everything. And that shortage is being supplanted with shrinkflation, so it makes you think as though everything's okay, when in fact, things really aren't that great, folks. And it's all related to the same thing, and that is people, for whatever reason, maybe it's because federal unemployment benefits are continuing and state unemployment benefit, people aren't motivated to go back to work. In my local Safeway, for those of you in other parts of the country, is a grocery store. You know, they sell everything that a grocery store could imagine. They tend to be very large. Safeway, which is our version of the grocery store, they can't find people. They said they've been having regular employee invite-ins. What's the term when you have like an open house? It's an open house. Yeah, it's an open house for anyone who wants to work. And they actually have these at the Safeway, sometimes during hours and sometimes after hours. And the last 3 that they've had, no one has shown up. Okay, no one has shown up. These are jobs that pay usually $13 an hour to $15 an hour, but they tend to be union jobs. So the pay scale increases relatively quickly and they can't find people. So as a result, the Safeway that used to provide sandwiches, they used to make sandwiches and then store a whole part of the Safeway with those sandwiches so you could walk in and grab them. That's not available. A lot of the other services aren't available too because they don't have the people. And then there's the other part of Safeway, which is you walk down the aisle just like you do in your grocery store, and you notice that the product is smaller. Check it out. Look how thin that box of cereal is now. It might be the same height, but it's a lot thinner. Look at the ice cream and look at the orange juice. So the other part of this is the orange juice has actually shrunk in size. Was that the final clip that we've shown on this one? That's what we had one more. Okay. So we're going to talk now about some of those products so that they're shrinking. So here's Edgar Dorsky again of consumerworld.org talking about how they're doing this and what the products look like. We have that final clip, and here it is.
Manufacturers know that consumers are price conscious. So if they're selling cartons of orange juice normally for $2.99 and they have to raise the price to $3.19, they really know that consumers are going to spot that. But they also know if they take out a few ounces from the orange juice container, most consumers are not going to know and not going to complain.
Yeah, so, I mean, we probably should have called this, honey, my package has shrinkage, we probably should have called it that. But because that's really what this is. It's the manufacturers that are trying to manipulate you into thinking that they're going to keep the price the same in some cases to make you think that, oh, there's no inflation in orange juice. But meanwhile, you're getting a full cup or glass of orange juice less than what you were before. And the bottle, you look at the bottle and you're like, you don't actually notice it right away. It's the same, more or less, shape of bottle for Tropicana orange juice, except that it's slightly shorter or slightly narrower. And it's, narrower, right? And I even noticed this recently with Starbucks, by the way, with, of all things, water. Okay, so there's a Starbucks in my Safeway. You see a lot of Starbucks in a lot of grocery stores. And I walked by and I knew I was going to do this story on the podcast. And I noticed their Starbucks water, they've also shrunk the water bottles. So the water bottles are narrower at the top. They taper off much faster. So it's like, wait a minute, there's a shortage of bottled water. Come on, give me a break. Well, it's probably because in order to make plastics, it requires energy. And in order to do that, energy prices have shot way up. So as Edgar Dorsky says, well, Americans are very price conscious, especially when they go in the grocery store. So the manufacturers are just making things smaller. And in some cases, keeping the prices the same. And in other cases, doing the exact same thing. They're doing both. They're causing inflation or increasing the price and also decreasing the size of the product. And that is, honey, I shrunk my package. We'll call it that. So next up, podcast listeners, Chuck Schumer alienates 74 million voters. How's that possible? Well, he managed to do it. So Chuck Schumer was in New York this week, and he decides to unload on the Trump voters and the Trump supporters. Folks, Donald Trump's been out of office since January, and yet the Democrat Party can't let him go because they have nothing really that is of substance to offer the American people other than more misery and making the economy worse with inflation and shrinkflation and who knows what else. So Schumer, of course, in order to keep his base stirred up, decides to attack not just Trump, but the 74 million people that voted for him. And he calls Trump a despicable, vile man. We had that clip, and here it is.
You probably asked yourself the same question I asked myself. How could 74 million people vote for such a despicable human being as Donald Trump? And I don't care if you're a liberal or a conservative, Democrat or Republican. He is a vile man. He is dishonest. He is divisive. That's what he loves to do, just divide and have people fighting with each other. He's a racist. And he always appeals to the dark side of human nature, which he's very good at, unfortunately. How did they vote for him?
So, according to Chuck Schumer, he thinks that you, as a result of voting for Donald Trump, are vile and you are on the dark side of things, namely that you are in the evil side of things in the United States, on the evil side of issues, on the wrong side of issues, and therefore you are an awful person because you and your 74 million best friends voted for Donald Trump. Voted for Donald Trump. That's ridiculous. Okay? Obviously, on its face, it's ridiculous. But who does that? Who attacks? The president's not in office. His supporters don't have the guy that they wanted in office. And Schumer, it's not enough that they're trying to ruin Donald Trump economically. And it's not enough that they're trying to take down his companies. They want to make sure that they take him out completely so he doesn't run again. But they also want to take out the Trump voters. I mean, folks, these people are going to vote again. Why would you alienate them? Why wouldn't you try to unite them and at least find out what it is that they really want? What is it that the Trump voters really want? I mean, they want free and fair elections. They want voter ID. They want a secure border. These are all things that Chuck Schumer doesn't want. They want an America where it is put first, not last. They don't want China first. They want America first. They want to repatriate good manufacturing jobs in the high technology sector and in the low technology sector. They want America to be as great as it once was. And they saw Donald Trump as the person who was leading them down that road. But Chuck Schumer doesn't just attack Trump. He decides, I'm going to attack the 74 million voters who want what is perfectly reasonable. But he's never really asked. And for you podcast listeners out there who think for 1 minute that you're going to try to politicize this issue, it's like, oh no, the Trump voters, they're bad too. If you ever listened to a Trump voter, have you ever gone into Pennsylvania and seen the devastation in the towns in Pennsylvania that used to be robust towns with great union jobs and factory jobs, and the same thing in Ohio and elsewhere? If you did, you would see nothing but devastation, and those jobs have left. The products that they once made are still being made. They just aren't being made here. And no plan was put into place to replace those jobs or to replace those industries with the next generation of technology and the next generation of manufacturing. It never happened. And so Schumer is saying, well, those voters are wrong. They're wrong. I'm not going to address their concerns. And they're un-American. They're on the dark side. And meanwhile, he's the guy, Schumer is, who says Trump divided people. And just 1 year ago, Schumer stood in front of the Supreme Court of the United States and he decided to threaten two Supreme Court justices over a case that was in front of them about abortion. Talk about dividing people and threatening people. I mean, that's what he did. We had that clip, and here it is.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price.
Yes, so that is good old Chucky Schumer, of course, a year ago, threatening Justices Kavanaugh and Justice Gorsuch and saying that they're going to pay a price if they don't rule a certain way in a Supreme Court case relating to abortion. And that's not divisive. That's not divisive. Calling potential harm to the justices of the Supreme Court because they just happen to have a different point of view, and calling harm to Trump voters or calling them on the dark side and evil and wrong-headed because of the fact that they have a different point of view. And speaking of which, a New York Times reporter had to delete a tweet, or chose to delete a tweet, but she kind of had to delete the tweet because she was called out on it after she was urging Trump supporters to be called enemies of the state. So, once again, a New York Times reporter decided to delete her tweets in which she urged Trump supporters to be called enemies of the state. And she only did it, that is, she only deleted the tweet because of the massive backlash. So New York Times reporter Katie Benner deleted tweets calling for Trump supporters to be considered enemies of the state after she faced a viral backlash from critics. Amid the first hearing of the January 6th committee on Capitol Hill, Benner suggested that in order to combat national security threats within the country, the solution was to target the voters of the former president, literally taking her orders from Chucky Schumer. However, the Times' Justice Department reporter later took down the tweets, claiming they were unclearly worded. Not that they were wrong, they just weren't worded properly. The Times did not respond to Fox's News' multiple requests for comment, including an inquiry about whether Benner deleted the tweets at the direction of the paper. So Katie Benner tweeted out, "I deleted unclearly worded tweets regarding the January 6th committee hearing." She deleted unclearly worded tweets. Yeah. In the original tweets, Benner stressed that the January 6th committee underscores what she indicated was the ongoing threat within the U.S. Today's January 6th Select Committee, she said, underscores the America's current essential national security dilemma. Work to combat legitimate national security threats now entails calling a politician's supporters enemies of the state. So she called all of the Trump supporters enemies of the state and national security threats. Benner explained, quote, "As Americans, we believe the state power should not be used to work against a political figure or a political party. But what happens if a politician seems to threaten the state? If the politician continues to do so out of office and his entire party supports that threat?" The Times' DOJ reporter cast doubt about the Pelosi-appointed committee would resolve the dilemma since it remained unresolved following the Russia investigation and both impeachments. Quote, "That leaves it up to voters, making even more essential, free, fair access to the polls," Benner concluded. So folks, what you have here is not just a partisan reporter, but an activist reporter who is calling the 74 million voters of Donald Trump enemies of the state. Enemies of the state. And that's the same week as Chucky Schumer calling the 74 million voters the same thing, right? That they are, in Chucky's words, on the dark side, that they're wrong, that they're evil, And we've been through this before, but Donald Trump hasn't been in office since January. And the Democrats are losing in every national poll on all of the important issues of the day. Policing, public safety, the border, international security, the military, the economy, they're losing. And even Jen Psaki in the Business Insider, White House press secretary Jen Psaki says, Biden doesn't want to fight Fox News after Trump completely destroyed trust in media and institutions. So Jen Psaki is like, well, the reason why we don't have the media trusted is because Donald Trump destroyed the trust in the media and in institutions. And so Joe Biden doesn't want to fight Fox News over, the questions that are asked by Steve Doocy. Because Steve Doocy, he might, is it Steve or Peter Doocy? Who's the young one? Is it Peter Doocy? Okay, yeah, Steve is the older one. So Peter Doocy keeps asking questions at these press conferences, and the Biden administration is getting very upset because apparently Fox News is the only organization that actually asks difficult questions. And so Psaki is saying, it's Peter, so I got it right. All right, it is Peter Doocy. He's the young guy, looks just like his father, but a younger version by like 25, 30 years. And he's the one that keeps asking questions like, what about masking up? Mr. President, you said we weren't going to mask up anymore. And now we may have a national mask mandate. And, what about children getting vaccinated? I thought we weren't going to have, you can just go on and on and on. But with this particular issue, Jen Psaki is like, oh no, it was Donald Trump that destroyed the media. So, of course, the theme of this segment is the Democrat Party can't let go of Donald Trump. That's all they have left to be able to blame as to why they're failing so badly in managing the economy, in managing the border, and in managing international affairs. And so they have to keep bringing back Donald Trump. It's Donald Trump. It's his 74 million voters that are stopping us from properly managing the economy. It must be their fault. It can't be our fault. I mean, come on. So next up, podcast listeners, the climate zombies. This reminds me of the Children of the Corn. I didn't feel like pulling that up again, but in the Children of the Corn, what is it? Stephen King, the Stephen King novel and Stephen King movie. The Children of the Corn, at the end of the show, I think at some point, the children walk out of the cornfield and they go after the parents and want to kill and hack all the parents to death. And so the climate zombies, it's going to be the same thing because, it's a religion. And the Biden administration wants to create the Civilian Climate Corps. The Civilian Climate Corps. So in NPR, it says, reaching back to the New Deal, Biden proposes a Civilian Climate Corps. With college classes going online because of COVID-19, Joe Sporfuth put his double major in political economies and educational studies on hold to move west and find work. When the pandemic was over, he'd go back. Well, you can get real into this stuff, the 21-year-old Ohioan said, grinning at his mountain surroundings that his fellow Montana Conservation Corps crew members saw as they were sawing, chopping, and lopping branches and logs away from a dirt path to make a trail. Standing unshowered in the shade of a tall stand of lodgepole pines in northwest Montana, he said it's a bit scary, though. It's a tough time to be a young person. COVID-19 has robbed many of them of experiences and plans. COVID-19, folks, has robbed everyone equally. Okay? If you weren't able to go to school, college, or K-12, or to work, or you had to work from home, or you had to study from home, you were pretty much affected evenly, unless you're, of course, the owner of Amazon or Walmart, which were considered essential. It's a tough time to be a young person because they've been robbed of their experiences and plans. Their unemployment rate remains high. College enrollment is down. To address these concerns and bolster preparedness for a warming world, President Biden wants to retool and relaunch one of the country's most celebrated government programs, the Civilian Conservation Corps. Except instead, it's going to be the Civilian Climate Corps, or as what I like to call them, the Civilian Climate Zombies. Created in 1933, in the wake of the Great Depression, the Civilian Conservation Corps put millions of young men, yes, just men, back to work. They moved from east to west to places they'd never been before, building bridges and roads, telephone lines, campgrounds, and dams. In other words, it was an infrastructure organization that was created by the government, the Civilian Conservation Corps. Infrastructure that is still used today, maintained by smaller Conservation Corps crews, such as the one that we just talked about. The original CCC ended in 1942, disrupted by World War II. Yeah, and obviously it was World War II that took us out of the Great Depression, wasn't the CCC. But Biden, he wants to create in his American Jobs Plan a $10 billion plan to launch a new large-scale 21st century Civilian Climate Corps. That's really what it's called, by the way. As it would be called, it would employ thousands of young people to address the threat of climate change, strengthen the country's natural defenses. No. It would not strengthen the country's natural defenses. What they want to do is they want to build like trails and parks. They want to build trails and parks. They already have parks, right? And so they want to build these trails all the way through the parks that connect to other trails. And I'm not really sure that's actually good for the environment, because a lot of these forests are untouched or virtually untouched. And creating more trails, I'm not sure is a good idea, but that's what he wants to do. So he wants to create a climate zombie, corps. And quote, just like we need a unified national response to COVID-19, we need a unified national response to climate change, Biden said, while introducing his new climate team. So we're going to have a climate organization, and the Wall Street Journal calls it a new national climate army. Democrats want to pay young Americans to tell you how to behave. This is what is really going on here, ladies and gentlemen. As the U.S. recovers from a pandemic, with workers and services and manufacturing in short supply across the economy, here's what no one sensible American thinks we urgently need: a huge new federal Civilian Climate Corps. Yet, that's exactly what Democrats want to create as part of their plan to expand government into every corner of American life. It isn't enough to lecture Americans about the supposed perils of climate change. Now, they also want to tax you and other Americans to pay your children to spend the next few years lecturing you like children of the corn. Except children of the corn, they killed you. I think that's the way this story ends too, though. President Joe Biden has requested $10 billion for the climate shock troops. They really said that. The climate shock troops in his American Jobs Plan. Like so many other ideas in this administration, the idea comes from the Democrat left, specifically the Sunrise Movement and Evergreen Action. Their idea was adopted by the New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of Massachusetts and Senator Ed Markey, also of Massachusetts, who have proposed a climate corps that employs 1.5 million Americans over 5 years. So you would have 1.5 million Americans paid by the federal government who would then be lecturing you about how you should live your life, knocking on your door. We actually had a dumbest bill about this recently. And it was in Montgomery County, and they want to do the same thing. Of course, many of those people in Montgomery County, Maryland, by the way, for you guys out there in California, Montgomery County, Maryland is a suburb of Washington, D.C., And many of those people work in the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C., which is why they want it as well. But they want to be the first to pass it. Biden wants to make this a national organization. The precedent is FDR's Civilian Conservation Corps, which paid Americans to work when the jobless rate was more than 20% in the Depression. Well, folks, our jobless rate is not high because we don't have jobs. It's high because we're paying people to stay home. But Democrats want to use this as an opportunity to pay people and create a new program based on the CCC in 1933, except that this organization would hire young people and pay them to talk to you about the climate crisis. If that mission sounds grandiose, you're getting it. The ultimate crisis of the climate is impacting every aspect of our lives. So the only way we're going to fully combat it is if we fully transform every aspect of our society and economy as we know it, says Ellen Scalise, a Sunrise spokesman. So this goes on and on and on. The Wall Street Journal article, it's a terrific article, and essentially talks about how these individuals in this bill, if it were to pass, would be empowered to knock on your door, to have conversations with you while you're sitting at the local restaurant and talking to you about what you're eating, because what you're eating might be creating more climate change because it's not, you're eating meat for breakfast, and pigs fart and cows fart, so that shouldn't be allowed. They're going to talk to you about whether or not you use your lawnmower or whether you're using the proper landscaping materials. They're going to talk to you about how you heat your house and cool your house. In other words, it is a climate Gestapo. And so we have this precedent, of course, that could happen. It's already happening in some communities, like in Montgomery County, Maryland. It hasn't been fully implemented. But you can only imagine that this is going to go very wrong and very soon. And they're using the COVID-19 crisis to say that too many young people aren't employed, when in fact, there are plenty of jobs that are out there. Many of them are, by the way, are really good jobs. They're just not being filled. And their idea is, well, if we create this new CCC, the 21st version of it, then these people will have jobs. And at the same time, they can be actors of the Democrat Party and essentially promote Democrat candidates, but using government money to do that. This is so dangerous. This is so dangerous because you know that the average person, once they get into this organization, they're going to be indoctrinated and they're going to be thinking that the climate is going to collapse. And instead of just conservation, and conservation is a good thing, they should also be taught about innovation, about how to solve problems, not just how to conserve. Both are important for our survival, not just conservation. And that's the climate zombies are coming after you. So next up, can Larry Elder beat Governor Newsom in California? Can Larry Elder, who filed to run for governor in California, replace Governor Gavin Newsom? So in the Wall Street Journal, it says the conservative radio host, which is Larry Elder, leads all of the other candidates, but a majority will have to reject the incumbent first. Why shouldn't a conservative Republican like Larry Elder be leading the race to recall Governor Gavin Newsom? Mr. Elder is an attorney, a best-selling author, documentary filmmaker, and successful talk radio host who was born and raised in Los Angeles. True, he's an amateur when it comes to electoral politics, but look at what the professionals like Mr. Newsom, a liberal Democrat, have done to the most populous state in our country. Crime in California has climbed in every city. Left-wing district attorneys compete to determine who can prosecute the least amount of bad people. And the state's homelessness rate is the third highest in the country, only after Hawaii and New York. And it's rising, which might have something to do with the heavy-handed zoning restrictions and the environmental regulations that make it impossible to have affordable housing in California. Californians pay energy bills that are significantly higher than the national average and well above what customers pay in neighboring states like Oregon. Yet millions of residents experienced rolling blackouts in 2019, despite all the money they pay for their electric bills, when a state utility purposefully cut off the power to avoid wildfires caused by outdated electric lines. And that's what life has been like in the progressive Eden before the pandemic. Mr. Elder, who's running for governor, told me in an interview this week, this is Wall Street Journal, that the state's over-the-top COVID response and the governor's aristocratic personal behavior probably did more than anything else to put his job in jeopardy. In a CNN interview last year, Mr. Newsom implied that his children who attend private school, listen to this podcast, listeners. In a CNN interview last year, Mr. Newsom implied that his children who attend private school were still learning remotely. In reality, his children had actually returned to in-person instruction months earlier, while the public schools remain closed in deference to the state's powerful teacher unions. So Newsom doesn't live the way the rest of us live. He issues decrees, but he doesn't live by those decrees. So the article goes on, nor has Mr. Newsom been able to live down his infamous private dinner at a fancy French restaurant in defiance of his own COVID restrictions. Mr. Elder said people are angry that the state was shut down in such a severe way during the pandemic, while this man was sitting in a restaurant with lobbyists and healthcare professionals, violating the very mandates they wrote. It wasn't the only example of the rules not applying to the governor, said Mr. Elder. Mr. Newsom's own winery in Napa Valley remained open last year, while he ordered other wineries and businesses across the state to close their indoor operations. So Newsom has a winery. By the way, this is new information, podcast listeners. Did you know that Gavin Newsom owns a winery? I didn't know he owned a winery. How is it that you are a man of the people and a progressive, and you believe in a flattening economy and socialism, and you own a winery? How is it that you're a progressive and your kids go to private school and they were in school while your children were home because they couldn't go to school because Newsom closed the schools? How is it that Newsom gets to go out to eat and you didn't go out to eat all through 2020, at least for the first 6 months of it, at least? And so I didn't even know Newsom owned a winery. I mean, what kind of regular person that you know owns a winery? Do you know anyone that owns a winery? I mean, I do know one person, but this is Maryland, right? And our wines aren't that great. So you can like start a winery. I mean, in Maryland, you can have like 5 vines and consider it a winery. But we're talking about California style winery, right? We're talking about real wine that's really good wine where the acreage costs a fortune. I mean, I don't know what that acreage is worth in Napa Valley, but it has to be, millions of dollars an acre. You would think, because the wine, the grapes and the vines are very mature. And so Newsom, the governor, owns a winery. Sorry, I don't mean to like focus on this so much, but I've never known that before. Californians, why would you vote for a guy in office that owns a winery? I mean, and think that he's going to be just like you. He's going to understand your problems. So Larry Elder, this talk show host, who also, by the way, happens to be black, is really doing well in the polls. Now, the polls show that he's about 2 to 3 points behind Governor Gavin Newsom. So he is behind, but he's within 2 points or 3 points. And he's a Republican, Larry Elder, in a state that is overwhelmingly not just Democrat, but like far left, progressive. At least that's what we're told. Maybe people are finally waking up. Maybe people are finally waking up. I can only hope that is at least a possibility that, people are going to look at Larry Elder and say, okay, I don't agree with his abortion stance. I don't agree with him on a lot of business issues. I don't agree with him on his views of climate change. But you know what? The state's falling apart anyway, despite all of the bills that Gavin Newsom passes, and the state is burning and things aren't getting better. And there's still massive water shortages. We don't have rain. There aren't solutions. Try electing a Republican. I mean, can it be any worse? Remember what Trump said? It's like, what do you have to lose? I mean, obviously unfortunately, that statement now, if you use that in a state like California, they're going to, oh no, that's too Trumpian. We can elect you because you said, what do you have to lose? But at some point, Republicans should start using that terms like, you have nothing to lose, everybody, because California is a terrible place right now. Imagine if you were living 100 miles from the forest fires in California. That's far away, right? You still, my understanding is the smoke and the soot, you still smell it all the time. I mean, your quality of life is not good. It's not good at all. And it's not going to get any better as far as I'm concerned, as long as the progressives are in charge, because they're not passing bills based on common sense. They're passing bills based on pure and utter ideology, without question. So on this particular podcast, we're going to cut it a little short because I've been losing my voice for the past 2 days, but it is getting better. That's the good news. So we're going to see you next time. And I want to thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. I want to thank you. Please join us again. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Parler, Rumble, and our website. And I didn't lose my voice. I can't believe it. I'll have it back tomorrow, I promise.